Yeah. So she'll be talking about bridging academia and biotechnology, pathways for scientific impact. Thank you for joining us. You have the floor now, and you can also share your screen.
Well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you to the host committee for inviting me to present. It's really an honor. And two, I just wanted to clarify, I'm not actually a doctor. So, but yes, thanks for the introduction. So I'm Laura Towart. I'm currently founder and CEO of Vivan Therapeutics, and I'm going to present today a discussion on bridging academia with biotechnology from bench to bedside. And so just a quick introduction to myself. I'm Laura Towart. I'm a second-time biotech founder. I built a company called Cellmatics, which was a fertility company that was genomics driven and turned into a women's health company that was, I started in 2011, and it was recently acquired this year by Gedeon Richter, which is a European pharma company. And I'm currently founder of Vivan Therapeutics, based in London. And my background is I was doing my PhD training at Weill Cornell Medical College in Manhattan. And I actually left my PhD to start my first company, Cellmatics, which is why I'm not a doctor. So I guess I wanted to just maybe start off by just telling you the origin stories of how I came to found Cellmatics and Vivan. And they both have completely different kind of founding stories. So I'll first talk about Cellmatics. So I was doing my PhD at Cornell, and I was in a laboratory at Sloan Kettering. I was studying molecular neuropharmacology, and I had a very difficult PhD. So I had a project that was very difficult. I had multiple failed experiments. I was hit by a car during my PhD, so I had to take a leave of absence. I had a lot of kind of trials and tribulations, and during that time, I really started thinking about what I'm going to do next, and I really started, trying to think and dream about graduating and moving on to something else. And then when I was asking myself what that something else would be, I started looking into going into biotech, and a lot of my friends that were graduating were getting jobs at companies in the New York, New Jersey area, in biotechnology, and also at pharma companies. And so I was looking into that route. But then I took a course at the New York Academy of Sciences, and it was called From Idea to IPO. And for anyone who doesn't know, an IPO is when you take a company public, and it's like the highest level of having a company and having it be traded on the public markets. And so I really loved that course, and it really instilled in me this drive to one day found my own company, and then hopefully also one day take it public. And so I went back to my roommate, and my roommate at grad school, I was put together with her randomly. But I was, always talking at night with her about, thinking about ideas of things that I was working on in the laboratory, things that she was working on in her laboratory, that we could potentially start a company with. And we had a lot of ideas for different companies. And actually we came up with the name Cellmatics because it kind of could span a lot of these different ideas. So the first thing we did was select a name. One of the companies we were thinking about starting was related to stem cells. So we're thinking, okay, Cellmatics is a good name. So we bought the domain name, on the internet, and started to design a logo. This is not the original logo. And then we had a few different ideas. We kind of mapped each one out, and we thought about, okay, with this idea, like who would own the technology? Because we were both in school still, and we thought, okay, some of the ideas that we're working on in the laboratory, Cornell would have some ownership in. So we started thinking, are there any things that we can think about, ideas that we have that are just completely our own, and things that were not stemming from the laboratory. And so we ended up coming with one of the ideas that we decided to take forward with Cellmatics, was the idea. It was kind of the advent of the genomics era at this point. So it was 2009. And so we decided to we hypothesized that that women were failing different fertility treatments due to genetic alterations in their DNA. And so we decided to do the world's first whole genome sequencing of a group of women who were failing IVF for no apparent reason. And then we were looking for signatures that can predict whether those people would fail or be successful. And so we built the company initially around that idea and that data set. We went on to develop, so that company we started in 2009. The company exited in 2026. So it was quite a long time of the company. And it went through many ups and downs. At one point, I was offered $10 million for my shares. I said no. And my founder as well, she also said no. We said, we're going to take this company all the way. And the company ended up having an exit just recently that wasn't really a big financial success for her or I. So it was a lot of ups and downs, and we learned a lot from that pathway. My second company, Vivin Therapeutics. Well, sorry, maybe I'll just go back to Cellmatic. So I started off as the founding CEO, and we raised the first capital from New York investors. And then I was married at the time, and my husband lost his job in New York, and he moved to the Middle East, to Bahrain. And so I moved with him, and I had small children. And after a few years of living in Bahrain, I was still running the company from the Middle East. And then when Cellmatics was about to raise its next round, the investor said, "Okay, Laura, if you want to still remain the CEO, you have to move back to New York." And I wasn't really in a position to do that. And so I said, "Okay, you know what? I'll resign as CEO, and I'll take a different position." And so I took the position of Chief Strategic Officer, and I focused on international relationships and developing those for the company. And so I was in that position for a few years, and then I'd say that the founder dynamics changed. So my once very good relationship with my co-founder, started to sour. And I think it was a lot due to the distance. And I guess she didn't feel as supported since I was away. And I wasn't really kept in the loop as much as I should have been. And so I kind of started to get pushed out of the company. And so at that point, I didn't have a day-to-day job. Became chairman of the company, which is a big honor, and kind of the ultimate, power of the company is the chairman. But I didn't have a job, and so I was thinking about what I was going to do next. And at that point, one of my friends from grad school knew about my work at Cellmatics. My main interest and kind of the reason why I wanted to start these companies in the first place is because I really care about personalized medicine, and my interest is really in that, and trying to bring new technologies that can help personalize patients' experience. And so she knew about that, and she was working at the Mount Sinai Medical Center in the tech transfer office, and she came across Ross Kagan's work. Many of you know, I'm sure, now Ross very well. And so she called me up and she said, "I think you're going to love this technology. I think it fits really well in with all of your interests." And so I flew to New York, and I met Ross and saw the technology in person. And I really thought, like, this technology has such an incredible potential to really transform people's lives, and people with cancer, people with rare diseases. And this was now back in around 2016, I think. So it's been over a decade now that I've been involved with the technology and working with Ross. And I'd say that I'm still as excited, if not more excited about it now than I was 10 years ago. So that says something. And then there were a few logos on here that didn't make the screen. And so there were a few companies that I started in between and after, well, in between and alongside, that didn't work out. And that's okay too. I mean, starting a company is always a very big risk, and some are going to work and some aren't. And so why I found a company in the first place. And so in my mind, brilliant science isn't really the same as patient impact. So there are so many discoveries in the lab, and there are so many academic discoveries that are published. there are a lot of patents that are filed. There are a lot of companies that are founded around them, but there are even fewer drugs reaching patients. So there's this big funnel of of discovery and into translation, and so it's an important for people to be thinking about starting companies to try to bring what they discover in the lab to to people and communities. So why also may you want to found a company? Well, the obvious one is money. So there's the opportunity of financial success. There's also the freedom of, being your own boss, and the power that comes with having money and freedom. And so those are other reasons why you might, it might be exciting to think about starting a company. And I'd say that one of the biggest things about starting a company is it is a really big risk, because you're leaving a place of security and moving to a place of insecurity. And there's a lot of, reward that can come from that, but it's also a lot of potential loss. So there's excitement that comes with it, but it's not always a happy time. So signals that your research might be translational. So one would be if if there's a named clinical or commercial problem that it solves, and that if there's a path to differentiation from the existing standard of care, if it's something that you can actually patent or protect, if you have a defensible position, if there are others being able to reproduce your results outside of your own hands, if you see interest from clinicians or the industry without soliciting it. So if people are starting to contact you and wanting to know more about it. And if you think that there's an economic model where someone would actually pay for it. And so one of the things that a lot of people ask when I tell them that I'm a founder, they say, okay, well, how do you manage the finance? How do you manage the regulatory process? How do you manage business development? How do you get people to pay for it? So founders do have to do a little bit of everything, but they don't have to be an expert in everything. And one of the things that I find that most interesting and exciting about the job is that every day I'm learning something new. And so one day I'm learning about how to use Claude to build my financial model, or the next day I'm talking to regulatory consultants. So usually you have advisors that are helping you with this, but you do have to have, of course, some knowledge. And ultimately, as the CEO of a company, all of the decisions, the final decision will be yours. So you have to surround yourself with people that can advise, but you also have to be comfortable and confident in making the decision at the end. And so how do you decide what to do, if you want to leave academia or if you want to stay where you are? So what you would give up is the academic freedom to follow curiosity without a commercial endpoint. This is the one thing that I'd say a lot of the people that come to work at Viven, the scientists that we hire, a lot of them have a really difficult time. And I think it is really difficult for a scientist, for a true scientist, to stop at some point. So sometimes we discover great things in the lab, but they're not things that we have funds to invest in, and they're not things that the investors want to invest further in. And so sometimes we have to just stop that that pursuit of interest, and we have to just focus on making money, and that's really what a company is at the end of the day. And so that's one thing that you give up. And then two, the publishing cadence and the peer credit cycle. So the company, while sometimes we do publish papers, it's not the end goal. And so a lot of times the number of publications are going to decrease. And the other thing is there's not going to be where someone is the single author and controls over the science. So I mean, a lot of the times our chief scientist, and with Ross's guidance and input, help control what we're doing, and how we're pursuing the R&D. But at the end of the day, it's the CEO who makes the decisions, and the CEO is making the decisions based on what the investors want. So there's a lot of limitations in which we can do. And then you're also leaving the safety net of institutional infrastructure. But what you gain, you gain speed. So I like to make a decisions, really fast. And the team always laughs at me because I always ask two questions. I say, like, how quick is it going to get done, and how much is it going to cost? And so you gain this kind of speed, and then all of the things that come with speed. So you have a direct line from the result to patient impact. You own all of the outcomes, so not just authorship or findings. And so that's of course very rewarding when what you're building is in the hands of patients, and they call you and say, that what you've given them is hope, or what you've given them is more time with their family and friends, and pain-free life and things like that. And it's also the ability to build a team around the gap, not just the discovery. So when you have an idea that you think is worthwhile and potentially something that you want to take forward to start a company with, the first thing you should do is do a patent search. So you could do these free online. So you could just go to the USPTO, that's the US Patent Office, or you can go to the International Patent Office, and you could just do a simple search. So put some of the keywords in, and you can see who's started to patent in that space. And I would say take some time and get to know and even maybe map out. And now you could ask, probably Claude or ChatGPT to do this for you. So it's a lot easier. And so you can see do you really have some space that you can protect, and then is it worth doing that? So a provisional application is something that it could be an academic paper. So let's say just before you're about to publish something, you can just submit the paper to file a provisional application. You can do this yourself. We've done it ourselves, just to save money. And then you have about 12 months from that point in which then you would need to file a full application. And a full application can start to get expensive, especially if you're thinking about patenting in multiple countries or jurisdictions. So I would say before you publish, if you're even thinking about it, you file the provisional, and then you have 12 months really to run around to investors, or maybe if it's something involving pharma, maybe it gives you some time to go and start having conversations with pharma teams, and really see if there's interest in investing in that idea. And then I wouldn't probably move to invest the full cost of the patent unless you have interest from the outside. Let me just see what else. Yeah, so the inventorship and ownership are legal questions, not authorship questions. So I would always recommend that you get IP counsel involved. And also it's important when you're filing the provisional application to think about who are all of the people that were contributed to that work. And sometimes, let's say it's an academic publication, maybe there's a lot of authors, so you'd have to get permission from them before starting a company, and either getting like written sign off from them that they don't want to be involved, and they're not going to come back and try to claim any ownership. So whatever, I would say anyone who's listed, make sure you have like absolute clarity from them as to who owns it. So what to start doing now? So if you're still doing your PhD or your postdoc, I would say always talk to your institution's tech transfer office. So they could, if you're thinking about taking something that you're doing, in your own laboratory forward, they can advise whether they think it's something that is going to be translational and something that can be commercialized. And and if you don't have ideas of your own, but you're thinking about starting a company with somebody else's idea, then they might have some technologies that are waiting to be commercialized but need someone to kind of lead that charge. And so that's similar to, my first company was my own idea with my roommate. My second company came from Ross and the lab at Mount Sinai. So you can start a company either way, with your own idea or with somebody else's. And yeah, the other thing is to file the provisional patent. Always, you have to file it before you disclose anything in public. So if you did publish a paper and then you want to patent it, sometimes there's difficulty. So it could say it's already been in, in the domain of the public. And so once something is in the public domain, it's hard to go back and say, oh wait, this is novel and this is my idea. Always start business. So BD is business development. Always start those conversations early. The most important thing about having a company is people wanting to pay for things. So if you can't make money, or there's not interest in people trying to collaborate with you to make money, then it's not going to be something that is likely to be successful. And something just I always recommend to everyone is to attend at least one conference or outside event outside of your immediate academic field every year, because it's always exciting to see what other people are doing, and then it really can help you expand your network. And if you're thinking about commercializing a technology or starting a company, always try to find one advisor who's in that world, either someone who's working at a biotech, started a company, working in pharma, and see if you don't have to have them as a formal advisor, but I would say have a few of these people around you that you can bounce ideas off. And just to remember, there's a lot of different paths, in the corporate world. So you can found your own company, you can join an early stage company, you can be a scientific advisor at a company. You can work with a technology and transfer office at an institution, so you can help direct other people who want to start companies and kind of assess their technology and help them with patenting and finding commercial partners. You can work in the industry and R&D, and also you can go into consulting. So you can consult on specific scientific areas, or if you become very well versed in the regulatory landscape, you can advise on that. Another thing, I think that was something that I was thinking of when I was in grad school also, is working on the legal side. So working as a lawyer. So if you go to get your law degree, there's a lot of need for people that have very deep scientific expertise to help evaluate patents and draft patents. So that's a whole nother side of it as well. And so I'll just put a few of the questions that I'm usually asked. So the two top questions I get asked are, if I start a company, should I have a co-founder? And that's a hard question to answer, because there's so many good things about having a co-founder, and then there are also a lot of limitations. So with my first company, I had a co-founder, and things went swimmingly for a while until they didn't. And so I know a lot of companies that have been broken up just because the co-founders had an argument, or the co-founders couldn't get along, or a lot of times the co-founders argue over the division of ownership, so the division of equity, um, division of power, so many things. So with my first company, I had a co-founder. With Bevan, I don't have a co-founder. Some investors insist that you have a co-founder. So in those cases, I've lost potential investors because I just refuse to have a co-founder. Uh, so it's really it's a matter of choice. It's one thing that I actually miss about having a co-founder is it's really nice to have someone who's in it with you as deep as you are. So of course the whole team cares about the company and they're all in pretty deep, but at the end of the day, if or at the end of the month, if I can't pay the team, I don't get paid myself. When there's no money for, for science, or for payroll, everyone looks to me. Like, I don't have anyone to share any of that burden with. But also when there's something, things that are good or things that are working well, I'm the main person rewarded. And so all of the credit is, usually lands on me. So it's really like very binary. It's either very good or it can be very bad. And then leading to that, how do you deal with failure? I would say that if you're going to think about starting a company, you have to get really used to the idea of failure and rejection. So there's so many times a day, day, week, month, where either I'm trying to raise money or I'm trying to get a client, and and you hear the big answer, no. And I'd say that it does get it gets draining to consistently fail and then have to have the attitude where you get up the next day and you say, okay, well, I'm gonna try this again. I'm gonna try it, talk to the 100th investor or the 101 investor, and have the same message, have the same, positivity, and communicate, your passion and your positivity towards the idea, and then keep trying. And so I'd say it is a really difficult thing, and it is also having a company is really risky, and if it does fail, which most companies do fail, you have to be ready for that. And I think that a lot of companies and a lot of founders, like I'm in a number of different groups with biotech founding communities, and almost everyone in that community has started more than one company and had more than one failure. And so I think it's something that most people just see the successes. They don't see that everyone is failing. And of course, we can't always be expected to knock it out of the park. Um, and it is important, though, that you have some financial security to be able to actually live with the failure. And I recommend, in that case, like sometimes you could start a company while you still keep your your current position, and you can maybe do it on the side of it if you're not prohibited from doing that from from your institution. So that's always a good thing. A lot of people that I know that start companies too, they also do consulting on the side. So they have some other form of income, or they do advisory work on the side. Or some people work at McDonald's, or have another job like that isn't so mentally challenging, but gives them some sort of stable paycheck while they're starting the company. And that's it. So if anyone has any questions, or wants to ask me a question, or have any topic they want to discuss, please let me know.
Thank you so much for that amazing presentation. I'm sure anyone who has started something or tried to start something can relate with many of the challenges and also perks that you've shared. So do we have questions in the house? Anyone? Questions and comments are welcome in the house and online as well. Yeah. Questions, comments. All right.
Hey Laura, this is Ross.
Hi, Ross.
Yeah, I think my question is, because we've now been together for a couple, 3 days. If you had to start another company, can't be a fruit fly to bedside, it can't be a patient database-based prediction company. What are some of the companies you would be excited about?
Oh, that's interesting. So let's see. I'm really interested in the longevity space. So I think companies that are either have technologies for kind of monitoring lifespan, or anything to increase lifespan. I'm interested in those type of technologies. Also really interested in an early detection of cancer. So that's we're on the therapeutics side, but I'm also really interested in the early detection.
Okay. I have a question. All right.
Thank you for your presentation. Please, when I saw the talk with bridging academia and biotechnology, I was actually thinking how we can take academic discovery from the lab to the biotechnology company. Now, I want to ask if there is any discovery from the laboratory in academia, how can we transfer this to the biotech company? Is it to find a suitable biotech company before starting the research, or getting a biotech company that will actually acquire this discovery after their research? I want to know how can we relate with those in a biotech company for those who are in the academia? Because not everybody is having interest in starting a company. Some of us want to remain in academia, remain in the laboratory, and transfer our knowledge, our discovery to biotechnology company to produce for for the population.
Okay, no, that's also a possibility. I'd say it depends on what the discovery is. I would think about who would be the potential, who would have an interest in that technology, and how would it fit into the landscape of another company's products. If it's something that could either enhance the product, or if it's something that if it's something that a pharma company would want, if it's like a technique or an assay. I would say just to start having conversations with them, but always make sure if you're going to have a discussion with a pharma company that you have them sign a non-disclosure agreement, so that protects you from you can share what you've developed without fear of them stealing it. So yeah, I'd say just you could always reach out to pharma or biotech companies and have the discussions and kind of try to shop your technology.
Yeah. Another question here. How do you navigate the challenges of fundraising? And especially as maybe a company that is not like well known yet, how do you build that trust to be able to raise enough funds to fund your ideas?
Well, fundraising is probably the hardest part of having a company, and I think and these days it's hard to get funding for academic research. It's hard to get funding for for science anywhere. A lot of the funding sources are drying up, and now a lot of funds, especially in venture funding, is going towards foundation models and more AI driven things. So which Vegan Therapeutics is involved in using machine learning, and we're also building valuable data sets that can be used for AI. But I'd say still funding is really hard to get, and especially women receive a very small fraction of all venture dollars globally. Even as a second-time founder, I have a really hard time fundraising. So it's really challenging. I'd say I've approached fundraising by really trying to get investors all over the world. So I mean, we started the company in London, but we have an office in Abu Dhabi. We also have an office in China, in Beijing, and so I've been talking to investors all around the world, just anyone who could potentially be interested, and it's really a numbers game. So it's have to talk to so many investors before finding the one or two that are going to give you funds. And so it's the most challenging part. I'm fundraising right now, and it's not fun. It's a lot of work,
Yeah.
and it's just really like I was saying, it's just there's going to be a lot of no's. Most people are going to say no, and what you're looking for is like the one or two people that are going to say yes.
So questions from the house? Comments, questions. Okay.
I would just say also grants are really good. So we've at Vivan, we've gotten we raised about 4.6 million pounds in investment, and then we also raised 3.6 million pounds in grants. And we got grants from Innovate UK, from the European Innovation Council, from smaller institutions. And so I'd say definitely look to see if there's grant funding available. And there's a lot of times where there's partnerships between either European companies, and I'm sure there are collaborative grants that you can get for working with companies in Europe, or companies in America. So I would say definitely if you're thinking about starting a company, or if you're even thinking about just advancing the whatever idea or assay that you have in your laboratory, if you want to just take it another step forward before you think if you need a little bit more investment before you can determine if it's commercializable, then I would say definitely look for grant funding.
Right. Hey, Laura, it's good to see you. So,
I
yeah,
anyone, all I see is myself.
yeah, hi. So, basically, I gave a talk yesterday to the people here, trying to inspire them about the importance of regulatory accreditation, stuff like that. So, can you give us a quick update on how Vivan has handled it, or what its current status is?
Yeah, sure. So at Vivan, we have We have two main products. So we have our what we call the personal discovery process, which is the patient would go to their oncologist, they would have their biopsy taken, and they have their tumor sequenced, or have some type of a mutation panel, and then we receive that data, of their genetic alterations. We engineer these personalized fruit fly models, and then we expand the population, test thousands of drugs and combinations, and we see which combination is going to be best for that patient. And so that process we call PDP, and that process when we licensed the technology from Mount Sinai, Ross had already been doing clinical trials, and so for that technology, there's no approval. We just offer it private pay patients as a clinical decision support tool. But from all of the data of all of the times that we've built these avatars for patients, we now have a product we call 2Match. And for 2Match, patients can go from sending us their tumor sequence to an immediate treatment recommendation based on our data set. And so that product we've been developing as a software, as a medical device, and we've been inching towards through the regulatory process. So it's been, because the regulatory process is, it's expensive and it takes time. So we're at the point now, we've gotten our initial, let's see, we got our initial designation as a cybersecurity. So we've passed that. So we have that kind of stamp on the technology that it's one more step in having a quality management system, the QMS, which is for one of the ISOs. And so we had that audit, and now we're at the point where we're working on getting the CE mark. And so we expect to have the CE mark by January. So we have a clinical study that we're doing, and we need that data from the clinical study to submit to the regulatory authorities. And so we've passed the institutional review board. The clinical study is going to be in Abu Dhabi. So we passed the medical institutional review board, but now there's also the Department of Health IRB that we need to go through, and we've just heard back from them that they have some questions. So once that study is initiated and completed, then we'll be able to get the CE mark.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you for such an amazing session. Thank you for agreeing to speak with the participants here at the NeuroCan workshop. We are grateful, and we hope to keep up the connection. Thanks, everyone. All right,
Thank you.
bye.
Okay, bye-bye.